From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three Podcast.
Welcome back, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, and of course, our family and friends to the Gimme Three Podcast, a series for cinephiles. I'm Bella Efstratis, and unfortunately, your favorite co-host, Nicholas Ybarra, won't be joining us today. He's off working some movie magic on set this week. But don't worry, this is not a solo episode. You guys won't have to listen to me talk to myself for the next hour. I'm thrilled to announce that I have a very special guest on the show today, one of my longtime college homies and fellow cinephile friend, introducing Michel Eljaiek. Mike, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Ready to get into these movies for sure.
Let's go. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us on the Gimme Three Podcast. I'm genuinely so excited to have you here and to talk about Yorgos Lanthimos. As I'm sure our cinephile listeners are aware, Yorgos Lanthimos' newest film, Kinds of Kindness, came out this week. And you saw Kinds of Kindness opening night. So without spoiling anything, can you tell us a little bit about that experience? Where did you see it? What were the vibes, initial thoughts, that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I got lucky. I was just checking for tickets. I was looking for tickets at the TCL Chinese Theater, but they weren't showing Kinds of Kindness, unfortunately. And I decided to check AMC, and there were 3 seats left at the Grove, and one of them happened to be right in the middle of the whole seating arrangement. So it was meant to be. So I bought the ticket, and yeah, I went and saw it opening night on at the Grove. It was really cool. It was at the Dolby Atmos theater version, so it was like stadium seating, recliner seats, like stadium speakers and stuff like that. So it was a really cool experience, and yeah, I'm a big Yorgos fan, so I was very excited to see what he came up with this time. And
Yeah.
all I'll say, I really don't wanna spoil, don't even wanna say if I liked it or not. Just whatever you're expecting, throw it out the window, because it was something else. I had a long drive home with no music on for sure after that. So
that's how you know you've seen Yorgos.
exactly, but it was I'm excited for the rewatch. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the rewatch.
That's great. I'm so excited to see it. I have yet to see it. Mike and I are gonna go again, or he's gonna go again with me on Tuesday. So I'm very excited to lock in on that one. But yeah, with Poor Things coming out last year and absolutely blowing audiences away, and a new film already in theaters, I feel like Yorgos seems to be one of the biggest directors of the moment. And I think this is so cool because obviously, if you've seen any of his work, the first thing you will notice is that it is bizarre, to say the least. As a Greek filmmaker throughout his filmography, we see a lot of inspiration from Greek cinema and specifically his exploration of Greek weird wave, which was something I was not familiar with before this, but it's basically a postmodern film movement that I think perfectly sums up his filmmaking style, as it involves withdrawn protagonists, strange and uncomfortable dialogue, and haunting atmospheric cinematography. 3 things that this man really excels in, if we're being honest. But Mike, I have a fun question for you before we get started. What was the first Yorgos Lanthimos film that you ever watched, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so the first one I checked out was actually The Killing of a Sacred Deer. That movie had been on my list for a while, and I'm very big on going into movies completely blind, and I had managed to keep this one also completely spoiler free. Had no idea what I was getting into, and yeah, I watched it by myself in my house, really late at night. Didn't really know what I was getting into, and man, that initial opening scene is quite the startling sight, but some may say it's beautiful as well.
It's very true.
It can be interpreted in different ways, and yeah, it was pretty surreal experience. I'd never seen anything like that, and like you said,
Yeah.
and with the Greek weird wave, the
Mm.
writing in all of his films is what honestly drew me to it.
Yeah.
Especially in Killing of a Sacred Deer, it's just so out there. I'd never
Mm-hmm.
heard people talking like that. It sounds like it sounds like it's AI right in there, right in what they're talking about, you
It's
know?
really disorienting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I feel like, especially in a lot of movies, you sit down and you're like, okay, I got to focus, you know? And
Yeah.
then,
Let me lock in. Yeah.
especially in A Killing of a Sacred Deer, they're talking about nothing half the time, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so hard to follow, but that's kind of what drew me into it, just never having seen anything like that, and
Yeah.
knowing that it wasn't nothing as much as that's what it sounded like. It was there for a reason to make me feel a
Right.
certain way, and it definitely succeeded at that. And yeah, from that moment I was hooked, and I watched his entire filmography in a week. So
I love I love it. He got you right where he wanted you. So had you heard of him before you watched Killing of a Sacred Deer, or did you watch it and you were like, nah, who made this shit?
yeah, literally, I had never heard of him before. Yeah, I just
That's
watched it and I was
crazy.
like, who cooked this up? Who came up with
Yeah.
this, you know? And
Yes.
it was really interesting because in that week that I was watching all his movies after finding out this guy existed,
Yeah.
I had seen the trailer for Poor Things, did not know it was
Mm,
his, that
right.
it was his movie coming out. I had seen it, I mean, previously to when I started the binge, but
Right.
yeah, I didn't know that was his. And then just kind of honestly adding the movies on Letterboxd, I saw upcoming
Mm.
film Poor Things, and yeah, I knew I had to watch it right when it came out, and yeah, it was one of my favorite movies of last year for sure.
Oh, it's so good. Unfortunately, it's not one of the three films we're talking about today, as we already discussed Poor Things on our top three of 2023. So check it out, guys, if you haven't listened to that one yet. But for our Lanthimos Spotlight episode today, we're diving into three other incredible films from his filmography, handpicked by our very own Yorgos aficionado, Mike. So without further ado, let's jump into the first film. Up first on our lineup for the day is Yorgos' 2017 psychological thriller, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. Funny enough, this was also my introduction to Yorgos Lanthimos. And man, what an introduction to his style and filmography. I mean, like, this movie is batshit crazy. So I feel like both of us took quite a nosedive into like his absurdist cinematic world with this one. But the film follows Stephen, a prestigious cardiac surgeon who finds himself caught in really an incomprehensible, twisted revenge warfare with the teenage son of a previously deceased patient. Martin is a very odd 16-year-old boy who becomes obsessed with Stephen and the rest of his family after the death of his father. Things take a deadly twist in Stephen and Martin's bizarre sort of father-son relationship when Martin explains that a violent curse will come for Stephen's family as retribution for his father's death on Stephen's surgery table. And with this curse, Stephen's wife and children will fall fatally ill, and in order to stop it, Stephen must kill one of his family members. The film won Best Screenplay at Cannes in 2017, very well deserved. And I would add that I think Barry Keoghan was snubbed for a Best Actor award for his truly bone-chilling performance as Martin in this film. But this film is also just a brilliant modern allegory for the mythological Greek tragedy of Agamemnon and Artemis. So, like, just to give you guys some background, in the original myth, Agamemnon offends the goddess Artemis by mistakenly killing a sacred deer while on his way to the Trojan War. Artemis then takes her revenge by preventing the Greek troops from entering Troy unless Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia. I have a lot of thoughts on this film, so I'm really excited to jump more into it. But first, I want to hear some of your thoughts on the film.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it was quite the experience.
Yeah.
watching this for the first time, and honestly, it was the writing most of all
Mm.
that really got me hooked. Like I mentioned previously, the cinematography is beautiful as well. It's very symmetrical, which is
Yeah.
something I noticed. And it's granted, a lot of the shots are shot inside of a hospital,
Mm.
but it just feels like the movie is very like boxing you in and very structured when everything that's going on in it is not at all. Like there is
Yeah.
absolutely nothing kind of holding, everyone's lives are falling apart, and
Yes.
it was just very very interesting. And yeah, I really like the movie, really like the whole Greek myth aspect that you were talking about
Yeah.
as well. And yeah, just one of the scenes that I always remember is the when they're having dinner close to the beginning of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all talking about each other's hair. He's like, "You have very nice hair as well," and it was just like
Yeah.
so awkward, so just made me want to like crawl out of my skin, basically. Like
Yeah.
it
It's
was
like the unnatural dysfunctional family dynamic that's like comes time and time again in Yorgos films.
exactly, yeah. And that's the thing, is like I always feel like Yorgos's film have like a central question or a central theme that they
Mm.
are trying to answer, or at
Yeah.
least aim to get at. And I feel this way with all of his movies, that there's something like that, and then he just uses the most absurd stories to get there,
Yeah,
you
the
know? And
craziest circumstances you could ever possibly imagine. Only he could imagine these circumstances.
literally, yeah. And yeah, that's honestly what got me hooked. The acting in it is also incredible. That's another thing I really like about
Yes.
Yorgos is his use of quote unquote muses, where he'll
Hmm.
stick with like Colin Farrell and The Lobster as well.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah, I can't wait for him to get working with Barry Keoghan a little more,
Yes.
because that pairing was that pairing has a lot of potential for sure.
I totally agree. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen a collaboration since, because this was like 2017, so this was a while ago now, but
Hmm.
hopefully it's in the works because I feel like Barry was made to work with Yorgos.
100%,
He
a hundred
knows
percent.
exactly what to deliver.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's I said that I think there's a main question it seeks to answer, and I think in this one it ends up being, is justice real, or like what is
Mm,
justice? And
yes.
I think that's it. Kind of they hit the nail right on the head at the end there, when we are actually talking about this a few days ago, and I
Yeah.
recited that part of Barry Keoghan's little monologue.
I don't know if what is happening is fair, but it's the only thing I can think of as close to justice.
Right.
And that line there just really sums up the movie for me. And yeah, it's I loved it. I loved it.
I totally agree with you on that. I feel like this film really takes the, you could even say like eye for an eye metaphor, kind of like
Hmm.
just to a whole new level. Like that's a perfect example in like the dialogue of it. Another thing that stood out to me was like visually, like when when Steven has Martin in the basement and he like bites Steven and then he like bites himself and it's like he's literally like tearing the flesh off his body. Like it's such
Hmm.
a vicious, like animalistic moment. And for me, that was like a big visual moment where I was like really pondering that message. Like this is so
Yeah.
twisted because it's like he's like proving that he's like, I don't know if this is right, but it's close, just even
Yeah.
with that like action.
And not only that, in that scene, but he literally rips out a chunk of his arm and
Yeah.
turns and is like, "It's a metaphor. Do you get it?"
Oh, it's so
It's like,
creepy.
man, what? Yeah. Yeah, and that's another whole aspect of the movie that also goes into a lot of what Yorgos does, where he
Yeah.
just puts stuff on the screen and is like, take it for what it is. you're gonna ask me questions, I don't have the answers for you.
The
Like,
ambiguity.
was Martin some supernatural being that had this power to like enact this? Is this just how Yorgos wanted things to be? And it's like,
Yeah.
yep, suck it up. You got to take it. This is how just it works. And yeah, and it's. I feel like Yorgos ends up giving you very little and asks you to fill in the gaps, and I
Yes.
really like that. I really like that.
I totally agree. It's so funny because the first time I watched this film, given that like similar to you, I had no background on like Yorgos or like what I was getting into. And I absolutely hated this movie. Like I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Um but then like having watched more of his films, coming back to this one to rewatch it for the episode, I had so much fun, Mike. Like I know you were expecting me to be like, fuck this movie, but like I was sitting there watching it and I was like, oh my God, I love this movie. I was like, this is crazy. I was not expecting. It's very rare for me to be like to watch a movie that just like doesn't hit for me to then like go back and give it a second shot. Which maybe is a bad thing, but lesson learned. Clearly, this was a great lesson for me because I went back and watched it and I was like, this is so cool. And it was just a very different experience and I really enjoyed it. I also think a big part of it is like having seen Poor Things, I do think this movie stylistically leans more like towards his style in Poor Things than like the other two films we're talking about today. Like you were talking about the cinematography visually, like the super wide shots or like symmetry and like even just the color palette felt so much more vibrant compared to some of those other films we're going to talk about today, where like Poor Things was like on another level of vibrant colors. But this one did have moments where I was like, ooh, that color looks so good. And I think a big part of that is also because I learned that this was shot on like 35 millimeter film, which is also why it looks so beautiful because it's got that like grain to it and the colors look so beautiful. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it because I really love how they play with the colors and like lighting in this film. Like I thought it gave every room such a specific ambiance. Like for example, the hospital is very bright and sterile with like kind of sickly green and blue tones, whereas like their house has a lot more like warm, darker hues, which I think makes it like equally cozy as it is a bit creepy. Like it could really go either way, which I think played really well with like the development of the story because it starts off strange, but then it genuinely just gets like scarier and scarier. Like this is a scary movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Deeply unsettling.
Yeah. And yeah, a little bit in talking about the cinematography of it and everything. I looked a little bit more into the movie and about the whole process, watched some Yorgos interviews about it as well and things like that. And there's a few things that I'm going to mention just that I think people should be looking out for in all the Yorgos films.
Please do.
That just I've noticed throughout all of them. But one of them is very rarely in a Yorgos movie will you see a character from top to bottom where their whole body is in frame. That very, very rarely happens. It'll either be cut off like right at the head level or like kind of mid cheek really, really awkwardly, or you'll just be looking at their calves while people are having like a very important conversation to the movie and like to the whole plot development and everything. And it kind of makes you take this backseat role. And it kind of goes into like the weird Greek wave, like protagonists that are kind of detached. And in A Killing of a Sacred Deer, what he was saying is that they made a point of always putting the camera to be either above or below. Like we are some little creature that's like following these people through this like terrible tragedy that is happening to them that is outside of their control, much of like how we're watching it happen to them. So it's
that.
And it's crazy because, and that's what I love about movies, because you felt that and didn't know it, you know, and it's like, that's how you know that he knows what he's doing back there, you know.
Totally.
And
that's so
that's
cool.
just something I looked into this movie a lot because it really hit hard for me.
Shook you
And
up. Yeah.
yeah. And another thing that in the movie, because obviously the whole justice thing, like I said, gets hit pretty right on the head there throughout the movie, which is something that Yorgos, I feel like, does for more commercial audiences and more just like wide releases to appeal to a broader audience, which is fair, you know, but because especially in in the movies we're going to be talking about today, he gives nothing, and you know, you have to really fill in the gaps. But another thing that I got from the movie was kind of like different reactions people will have to either fate or like the consequences of their actions, looking specifically at Steven. And it's like, because the way I had it was like, I'm gonna butcher all these names. I might just do the actors here, but
no, you're good.
Like Colin Farrell's character Steven, he's kind of in denial the whole time. He doesn't even want to believe this thing is real,
right?
You know, like it's so beyond his comprehension. Like him dealing with the fact that this is happening because of something he did. He doesn't even want to acknowledge that and completely disregards it. And then his wife, played by Nicole Kidman, is kind of she believes it. She thinks it's a possibility, even though she has apprehension. She wants to figure out why, if it can be changed, if it can't be changed. Why did this happen? Is there a reason, you know?
Yeah.
Colin Farrell's character was just like, I don't even want to think about it,
He's like,
you know?
It doesn't matter.
And then their daughter was basically just like, yeah, this is going to happen.
Yeah, she didn't give a shit.
She was like, this really isn't going to, like, yep, this is going to happen. When she looks at her mom and she's like, Mom, quit being so tragic. When she's like in the hospital bed or something along those lines, it's like, she's fully processed all this and is just ready, like, to move away with Martin. You know?
Because she's also like, it's not going to be me.
Exactly. She's like, yeah. And then Bob, the goat,
the
little
goat.
boy.
Rest in peace, Bob.
I was struggling to come up what part he played in this, you know, in this whole like how to deal with this fate situation. And spoilers ahead, but I honestly think he is just the unsuspecting victim of all of this, who ends up unfortunately having the least role in all of this, you know, and ends up succumbing to being the victim of this terrible tragedy. And there's a lot of layers to
there's a lot.
Yorgos.
I also wonder if like it could be, and this might be a stretch, but when you were saying that, I was just thinking about like him being the youngest. Like he's probably the most innocent out of all of them, and you know, sacred deer, like innocence. I feel like those go together, even though that's not exactly like how the myth is. Obviously, it's not like directly derived from the myth, but poor
and
Bob.
just seeing like how it breaks them all down, you know, like one of the most gut-wrenching scenes for me in the movie was Bob towards the end, crawling around the house, cutting his hair, trying to prove himself that he's worthy of his dad's love and his dad letting him live. I was like, oh man, that was
devastating.
That one was rough. And then also Colin Farrell as well, like that scene where he's just outside and then he starts like, he just can't take it anymore, sort of thing. And even the daughter, when she's on the bike with Martin, it feels like that scene feels so like dreamlike and surreal, like it's almost in her head kind of thing. And
who knows if it really happened, almost.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like the denial thing too, that got me thinking about how, and just seeing how it like affected all of them. One thing I noticed is how much everyone says absolutely fine when things are absolutely not fine. Like,
interesting.
Right after all the stuff goes down with Bob in the hospital, like his dad Steven just keeps being like, he's absolutely fine. He's absolutely fine. And then like that night, the daughter comes home and like the mom, Nicole Kidman, is like standing outside just watering the grass with a cigarette. Like looking really not well. And she's like, Mom, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. It's like, no, you're not. You're not fine at all. So I thought that was like a really interesting, like we were talking about just patterns and stuff in Yorgos movies. And I thought that one was definitely really interesting and like very telling of the characters and like the vibe as well.
And also something I found.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, that I found pretty interesting in the movie is that they put such like a mythical concept surrounded by everyone other than Martin and the kids trying so hard to explain this through science and fact and medicine. And it's like, it needs to be some kind of neurological disorder. It has to be this. It has to be that. And that just, it just kept playing on to his Stephen's denial of the whole thing. And he was like, everything in science was telling him. And it was like, is fate real? You know, like, is this something that transcends science? And, you know, like, is there something more?
Like you said, his wife was like, she's also a doctor as well, not in the same field, but like they're on the same playing field. And she was like, personality wise, more open to being like, okay, I've accepted that this is a crazy circumstance. I'm going to go with it and try to figure out what we can do. And so it's really interesting to see that like divide in them. And I wonder if a lot of that also just comes from like his own regret and arrogance with like what happened with Martin's dad. Like, you know, there's that scene where he's like, a surgeon never makes mistakes. Like it's only the anesthesiologist. And then the anesthesiologist is like, a surgeon always makes the mistake, not the like they go back and forth with it. It's just like, oh boy, what a disaster.
He was dealing with a lot. He knew his consequences.
And I mean, of course, we can't move on without just shouting out Barry Keoghan eating spaghetti in that spaghetti scene. It's
I watched that movie with my roommate Aaron. Shout out Aaron Masick.
Shout out Aaron Masick. Hey Aaron.
He fell asleep during that scene. He fell asleep.
You're kidding.
I looked over and I had to wake him up. No, I woke him up and made him rewatch it right there because I was like, "You are not leaving this without seeing this scene." And it was that's a very very important scene in the movie for sure. And got to give Barry Keoghan.
Yeah, whatever.
I apologize.
Apologies, Barry.
I apologize. Since I know he's going to be listening to this, I apologize.
I love you, Barry.
But and just before we're moving on from this one a little soon, just the things I would look out for in Yorgos movies if you're going to be doing a deep dive, I'd say head trauma always happens in a Yorgos movie. Getting woken up to some terrible situation always happens in the Yorgos one. And this one, is when he wakes him up and takes him and is like, he's downstairs. Like the kids are all sleeping and the whole family's asleep.
Yes.
And he just wakes him up and he's like, wake up, wake up. And they're like, oh, he's downstairs. And they're like, what? And they go down there. And that's when you find out he's kidnapped Martin. You find it out just as the rest of the family does. And since it's been talked about before, poor things.
Yeah.
Mr. Wedderburn gets woken up to all of his money being gone after she gives it to the poor people. And drastic plot changing moment in the movie. So and little awkward dance scenes. Always gotta get those in there for Yorgos. Gotta get the weird.
I'm trying to think of the dance scene in this one.
In this one,
maybe he substituted the daughter singing "Burn" by Ellie Goulding because that shit was so awkward.
That, and also when she's doing like the scales and Colin Farrell just like starts clapping at her. It's some form of awkward performance in there. And it's cool to see a director keep these tropes in the movie that might not necessarily, he just wants to put them in there, you know? He just wants to include that in there and cool to see that for sure.
Yep. So if you guys are interested in watching The Killing of a Sacred Deer, or rewatching, you can check it out right now. It is streaming on Max. So check that one out and let us know what you guys think. All right, Mike is going to introduce our second film of the day. Take it away.
Yes, so the second film we're going to be talking about today is Alps, again by Yorgos Lanthimos. It was released in 2011, and it is his second film that he released, kind of where he was the main director and had the main role spearheading everything, and it was his whole deal. This one was his second one, which followed Dogtooth, which came out in 2009, but we will be talking about that one a little later. So,
Yes.
this one deals with a gymnast, her coach, a nurse, and a paramedic who start up a small business where, in their own twisted way, they help people deal with loss by role playing as their deceased loved one in different scenarios. So yeah, this one is another one that again took me aback a bit just because it was so drastically different to the style that was done in A Killing of a Sacred Deer, and it was just a completely different style in filming. The writing was still there. The writing was still there. It was still
Definitely.
in that classic Yorgos style that got me hooked in the first place. So I was very happy to see that, but like I mentioned previously, this one gives you very, very little to go off on, and
Yeah.
it's really up to you to fill in the gaps, to even understand what's going on half the time throughout
Yeah.
the movie.
Yeah.
I will say there is more dialogue in it than I remember on my first watch, so that was cool to see.
Oh,
But yeah,
interesting.
I was really excited to watch this one with my friends and stuff because
Yeah.
letting the cat out of the bag, we had a movie night for a lot of these movies.
Yeah.
So
We got to watch these movies together, which was a lot of fun.
yeah, that was great. So I was very excited for Bella and all our other friends to watch this one because it really is out there. It's completely in Greek. All the actor the just the scenes of the way everything looks is very Greek. All the
Very
signs are in
Greek.
Greek. Everyone's talking Greek, and yeah, it was definitely something different. So yeah, what'd you think about it?
Yeah, so this was a film that I really needed to sit with. Like usually I'm all for jumping into conversation and like dissecting films after watching them, but at the time like right after watching, I could not vocalize how I felt about this film. But after taking the week to sit with it and really think about it, I decided that I actually really liked this film. I didn't know if I did, but now I know I do. So um I'm gonna get my criticisms out of the way. How does that sound? Because like
Please,
I
please.
want to talk mostly about the good in this film because there is a lot, but I do have some minor qualms. So, well, okay, hold up, backtrack. First of all, this film I think has such a great concept. Like I'm honestly obsessed with the concept. It's so Yorgos, and like you were saying, like it fits the Greek weird wave style so perfectly. But that being said, I don't know. A part of me, I feel like I kind of felt like out of all the films we watched for this, it was kind of the easiest one for me to follow, like just in terms of what
Mm,
was happening with like the basic plot with it. Um,
mm-hmm.
and this was only a little bit of an issue for me because I think, like you were saying, I think so much of the excitement of watching a Yorgos film is like the mystery and the ambiguity. It's like discovering what is really going on in this world, like with these people
Mm-hmm.
and what are they even doing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with this one, it kind of felt more straightforward and obvious to me compared to the others, which would not be a bad thing. But my issue with it is that for like a 93-minute movie, this felt like a 3-hour movie. Like this felt
Mm-hmm.
longer than Killers of the Flower Moon, which is kind of crazy. um, so I don't know. It just I felt like it didn't need to be a feature length film. Like I honestly think Yorgos could have taken this really brilliant concept and made it more of a short film or like a long short
Mm-hmm.
film, 40
Yeah.
minutes maybe. I think making this a feature film felt kind of like a stretch. Like I really do like his eerie and still cinematography style in it, like the cut off stuff that we were talking about. But in this film, it kind of felt to me more like his experimentation film. Like I could see how he was experimenting with the camera, exploring his personal style in the medium. And so like in that way, it felt like a lot of these lingering shots or scenes were more like for his own gain in like the filmmaking process. And they just didn't do as much for me in the film as like other ones. But like it almost felt like he was using those moments to just like explore his own filmmaking process just to get to a feature length film, which was, for me, it was just a little bit unnecessary. Like the perfect example I would give is like in our Pixar episode a couple weeks ago, we talked about how like the Pixar crew said from going from Toy Story to A Bug's Life was going from like a freshman year project to senior thesis. And ironically, I feel like Yorgos did this backwards with like Alps and Dogtooth. Like I was so surprised to learn that Dogtooth came before Alps, because no offense to Alps, but like Dogtooth is like worlds better than Alps, in my opinion. Not to say Alps is a bad movie at all, but I just thought that was really that those are really my only qualms with it, which is really not that bad. Like I honestly did really enjoy this movie. And all that being said, I think there is so much good stuff to unpack in this film. Like obviously I love the concept of like just a weird motley crew of people offering a service to like volunteer themselves as substitutes for like these deceased loved ones, or families with deceased loved ones, just to like ease the grief for them. I thought that was just fascinating, and there's so many layers to like such a simple idea. Like I don't know, it got me thinking, the fact that they even have customers who are open to this idea and like willing to pay them is so interesting to me. I think that alone kind of says a lot about humans and coping mechanisms and grief. But then like on the other side of things, oh sorry, go ahead.
No, just a good example of what you were saying, because I agree. I was thinking about that as well a lot. And it's like when towards kind of the middle part of the movie.
Yeah.
I don't even know, because you're right. It feels very,
it's
very
just
long.
Like goes and goes and goes.
Yeah, but towards what I think is kind of the beginning, middle-ish, when the tennis player passes away.
Yes.
And she breaks the news to the parents, to the family. One of the main actresses, I'm blanking on her Alps mountain name.
Is it Monte Rosa?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Monte Rosa, when she's breaking the news to the parents that her daughter died, she says it by saying that she lost the most important match of her life. I'm like, if someone says that to me about my child dying, I don't ever want to see that person
punching
again.
them in the face. Yeah.
And yet they hired her to play her dead daughter, their dead daughter.
So true.
And that was just so crazy to me. But no, please go ahead.
No, that's literally, I didn't have an example, so that was perfect, because I was trying to think of something for that. And then like the flip side of that would just be the fact that there are people willing to do this kind of work for a living. Like this is where Yorgos really gets to shine with his creepy characters and dialogue. Like what kinds of people would do this? And the bigger question is obviously why. Like what does each person gain out of doing this? And I thought the film explored this in a really cool way. Like some people are in the group are more vocal about it than others. One of them, his name is Matterhorn. He like genuinely enjoys spending time with his client, who's like an older woman grieving her dead husband. And he gains more from it than just money. Like he genuinely enjoys it. He gets pleasure out of it. Whereas Monte Rosa, our lead in the group, her intentions are to me much more ambiguous and confusing. And like this type of job seems more detrimental to her well-being than to like the others in the group who are like less affected by it in a negative way, if that makes sense. Like the biggest example of that for me was when towards the end of the film, when we realized that the man she lives with isn't a client, it's her real father. Like that scene was so horrifying to me. But it's also such an exhilarating climax. Like I'm always down for a woman spiraling out of control or into madness in film. So I really, really enjoyed like the climax end of this film. I thought it was so much fun and so interesting. Like it got me thinking about, sorry, I'm like rambling right now. Feel free to like interrupt me.
No, please.
But like her spiral was the most intense identity crisis I've ever seen. It was so good. You know, she's playing her father's daughter, she's her father's wife, her dead mother, she's her secret client's teenage tennis playing daughter, but like who the hell is she? Like, and I think that's why we don't even, at least I don't remember if they give her real name in it. I don't think they do. Like she's basically nameless, identityless.
They don't give anyone's real name in the movie.
Right? Yeah. So I thought that was really cool. Like she's kind of no one and nothing. And I think that is arguably like every human being's worst fear. Like everyone wants to be or feel at least like they are someone or something to someone. And to not have that is like definitely enough to drive someone mad. So in this way, I thought this film was definitely one of the more like emotional Yorgos films I've seen. And her character's like internal turmoil and then quite external chaos was really heartbreaking to watch as well. But
and I agree a lot with the whole identity thing, because I think as much as yes, this movie is about grief and relationships and what that means, I think the big thing in that was kind of overarching the whole thing was Monterosa's identity crisis that I think it comes into full force at the end, but I think is there way, way, way before, you know, and has just been there throughout the movie, because like you said, it's like, why are they doing this? Why is this the side gig you picked?
Yeah.
You know? And it becomes very clear close to the beginning of the movie when Monterosa keeps the tennis player client hidden from the rest of the group that you're not doing this for money. You know, she even says the first 4 are free, which, knowing and seeing how Mont Blanc, the leader of the group, is, he would not be letting the first 4 sessions be free.
Right. He's like a mob boss.
Exactly. And she's doing this like, kind of, it seems like she's doing this for her own gain, but not in the sense of like how the Matterhorn is doing it to kind of just fill a void of like a friendship in his life and have this relationship with the older woman. I think as much as, like you said, that her intentions are a little bit more ambiguous, I also feel like they're a little more sinister in a sense, you know, because I took it kind of like, I can't be like, I don't know who I am myself. I'm going to try to be this tennis player girl.
Yeah.
You know
what that feels like.
And she started to become her, almost took her ex-boyfriend.
That's
you
right.
know,
Yeah.
And it was just really, really crazy to see her kind of like really adopt this. And then also thinking about this, because like you said, it was a thought that came up watching the movie, like, why are these people agreeing to take on this job?
Yeah.
I'm still kind of not clear as to why the gymnast was taking the job, because she was getting her pay withheld because of bad performances, and she still continued to hang upside down and recite all of the words that she messed up with the older gentleman, with the older client that she had. But it's like, what are you gaining from this? Like, this, like, it feels like, I don't even know if it was maybe to try to prove to her coach that she deserved to play pop song.
Oh my god, that was so good.
Yeah, that one was pretty interesting one to look at, also because it ends with her.
Yeah, it starts and ends with her. Like the dancer, right? The gymnast or whoever.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole story starts and ends with her, yet throughout the entire movie, it feels like her storyline is not even secondary.
It's literally
like,
just tossed aside. Like,
exactly.
Even when she's going through like suicidal thoughts and like, she literally does try to like take her own life, and you're just like, oh my God, there's some serious shit happening here, but like we don't really see past that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and something that I found pretty interesting with what you were saying is that this one was one of the more emotional Yorgos movies for you.
Yeah.
I feel the complete opposite.
Really? Yeah.
Because this movie felt so cold, and it felt so, and it's not what I expected. I read a synopsis of people helping others with grief by playing their deceased family members, and I'm like, man, I better lock in for this, know?
It's going to be a touching, really, emotional ride, but not really.
Or like very emotionally heavy, but it's not. And I think that was done for a reason, because this was not emotional for the actors or like the characters there either. Like they're very much so just going through the motions of these conversations that they had in different random scenarios to try to fill that void. And just like, if one of my family members died and I just hired some random bloke off the street to play him, like in my living room, like
it's
what?
Really
like,
freaky. Yeah.
I'm not going to feel emotional to this person that clearly has no resemblance. Like, it was a very, like you said, super interesting concept that it's like, and then that made me kind of think of like that Yorgos was trying to get into, like, what are relationships, Is it just merely the interactions that we have with people throughout our life or the day, or is there something more behind that? Like, is having the person that said good morning to you every day just have someone else say good morning to you? Does that like fill that void that person left?
That's
exactly. And that's a big part that I took about this, in that I saw throughout the movie, and was something that I really, really liked this movie when I first watched it. And it's still pretty low on the Yorgos list, which is crazy. And I love
it says
this movie. I really like this movie, and I think there was a lot there. I do agree with some of your qualms about it as well. Just
mostly just
it
the
does
long stuff. Me.
It does just feel a little bit longer, but I think the length of it, because the length of it comes from seeing these seemingly random interactions between random clients that you've never seen before, so you're not attached to them.
Right.
And much like the actors in it, when they're doing it, they don't know who these people are. Like, and it's just these random interactions. But something that I picked up is that not all those interactions were good.
Yeah.
Like, these people were willingly reliving arguments, catching their partners cheating.
Right.
And
right. Yeah.
I think that shows another whole aspect of grief and processing, like dealing also with the fact that all of these relationships maybe weren't good, but they're gone now. So it's like maybe you even end up missing those parts, or like even being able to have that. And so, I just think that those scenes ended up giving a lot more context to like what they were all really doing and why this was taking such a toll on all of them. And man, we'll be here for hours if we start talking about the lady that was hiring these people, even though she was blind and couldn't see them. We could be here for hours talking about that.
Perfectly said. But yes, it's so true. Just having that presence is peace of mind.
Exactly. And it was just super, super interesting. Another central point that just takes the most absurd story to talk about it and get to what Yorgos is trying to say. But yeah, and I agree. I was surprised to see that this one, because I totally forgot. I was surprised to see that this one came out before Dogtooth, because genuinely, like, Dogtooth, it's on my top 4 on Letterboxd. It's one of my favorite movies. I love that movie. I'm so excited to get to talk about it. It's got a lot to unpack, but I think this one was just a different step in a direction for Yorgos. And I think with artists, that's something that you have to kind of appreciate for what it's worth, you know?
Totally.
Because I was thinking about this, maybe because I just watched Kinds of Kindness.
Right.
But, you know, when you have a music artist that you really like listening to, and then they drop an album that is so completely different than what you've heard. So at first you're taken aback and you're like, whoa, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then seeing like, okay, they're moving in a new direction, trying something new that I'd never heard before, never seen before. And I mean, yeah, I like I said, Yorgos just tries a whole bunch of different things. I can't even compare any of his other movies to Kinds of Kindness that I've seen. There's literally nothing else like that. So, go watch it. Go watch it in a theater. A theater. Go watch it in a theater.
Don't miss your chance, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Do not miss your chance. Definitely worth it in the theater. It is an experience for sure. Yeah, but Alps, man.
Alps, what a film. Man. What a film. Definitely one worth checking out. Obviously, I know I went on a whole rant about it being super long, but it really is only 93 minutes, guys. So if you're interested in it, definitely give it a shot. I think, especially if you are a fan of Yorgos, it's a no-brainer. Check out all of his films. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Let me see. Let me look through my notes real quick here.
I did look up that Monte Rosa has, I guess, like the actual mountain has 4 faces, which I thought was really interesting because she kind of has 4 different masks. Like, her identity as her father's daughter, her identity as her dead mother, her identity as the lamp shop owner's wife, and then her identity as the tennis playing teenage daughter.
That's gas. That is gas. That is movie making gas. Yorgos is the GOAT.
He's the GOAT. Yeah, I didn't do too much of a deep dive into there. I couldn't find that much about Alps. I think it might be a bit of like his more underrated or
it is very much
as well. So yeah, just reading about Monte Rosa having the actual cliff having 4 faces, I thought says a lot about the character having those 4 identities. And I'm curious, like, I even just like, it got me thinking about all the other names. I can't really remember them, to be honest, but I know that like the Matterhorn is like a deadly peak. And I feel like the guy who adopts that moniker in this is like, he's very frightening to me. Like, we have that kind of like very creepy interaction with him and his gymnast, like, because he's her coach, and there's definitely a very toxic, inappropriate dynamic between them. And like even in the opening scene, she's like, "Why can't I dance to pop?" And he's like, "If you ask me that again, I'm gonna break all your arms and your legs." It's like, oh, okay, this guy's vicious. But I don't know much about Mont Blanc. Listeners, if you guys know anything about the Mont Blanc mountain, let us know.
I'm pretty sure you said it's just the biggest one.
Okay, so like the leader.
Yeah, he just wanted to take that one. I think I saw that, but yeah. Someone watching, let me know.
I can't remember what the gymnasts was, but
see what I mean? And they started and ended the whole thing with her.
It's really an interesting fact.
It's really
Listen to me being like, my problem with this is that I had it all figured out. I just got humbled. I just got humbled on my own podcast. So thank you. It's good stuff. This is what the Gimme Three podcast is for, honestly. Getting down to it. All right. Well, if you guys want to check out Alps, right now it looks like you can rent it on Amazon. I'm sure it will be at your local video stores. Definitely check those out. Support digital media. It's important, you guys. All right, listeners, we're going to take a quick break. And during that break, you're going to hear from Nick's incredible wife and PGA producer, Sonia Maru.
Hello, I'm Sonia, and this is my Movie Minute. People are worried about the future of the movie industry, and for good reasons. But when I think of the movies of 2023, things seem more hopeful. Martin Scorsese is 80 and still putting out important work. Godzilla movies are still great, at least the Japanese ones. Barbenheimer was an insane cultural and box office event. And two of the biggest movies of the year were proudly and profoundly feminist. Of course, I'm talking about Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things, starring Emma Stone as the singular and inspiring Bella Baxter, and Greta Gerwig's Barbie, starring Margot Robbie. When I finished watching Poor Things, my first thought was, that was like avant-garde Barbie. Or if you want to flip it, call Barbie Pretty Plastic Poor Things. The two movies just have so much in common. Both have female stars who also produced. Both are about women created by a male god figure who leave their safe, constructed, and limiting places of origin to enter the real world and discover what being a woman, a human, and herself is all about. And for both Barbie and Bella, a key to self-discovery and full personhood is to discover and take power over her vagina. I seriously haven't heard enough celebration over the fact that the last line in Barbie is about her vagina. I was so surprised and delighted. I love how once Bella and Barbie unlock their autonomy, they freely share it with all the other women they know, and even the men. Also, in both films, the male characters aren't evil. They're just products of and participants in patriarchy. And the ones who accept the overthrowing of the patriarchy become open to growing into men who are respectful and caring partners, coexisting with the women, as long as they know that the women are the real bosses, which sounds great to me. I can't wait to check out what Emma, Yorgos, and the team have in store for us in Kinds of Kindness.
Welcome back to the Gimme Three Podcast, everyone. Today I'm here with my wonderful guest, Michel Eljaiek, and we've been talking about some Yorgos Lanthimos films. So far, we've covered The Killing of a Sacred Deer and Alps. And now, our final film of the day. Our final film is one of Yorgos' most acclaimed films. It won the Prix Un Certain Regard at the 2009 Cannes Film Festival, was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars, introducing Yorgos' masterpiece, Dogtooth. So, here's the scene. In what appears to be a perfect suburban family is actually a secluded, brainwashed cult. The parents of this unnatural family have raised their 3 children, who are really more full-grown adults, in the most isolated way imaginable. As the film progresses, we discover that the kids are completely unaware and entirely misinformed about the real world beyond their property. However, when the father hires a prostitute for his son, fragments of the outside world begin to infiltrate their hidden, fabricated existence. These bits and pieces of information take root in the eldest daughter's mind, sparking an overwhelming curiosity and igniting her desire to explore beyond their sheltered life. This film has easily landed near the top of my list of the most mind-boggling, creative, and haunting films ever made. I think this is genuinely a masterpiece and a film that is truly original, something I've never ever seen nor experienced before. Before fully jumping into it, Mike, what are your thoughts on Dogtooth?
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite Yorgos films for sure, as well as probably one of my favorite films, period.
It's in your top 4, right?
It is on Letterboxd. Yes, it is. It is in my top 4. It just, like you said, it gets into a lot of deep kind of tropes and philosophical questions and stuff like that. And that's something I really enjoy when a movie makes me think a lot, especially after I'm done watching it. And this one I was definitely taken aback by it when I first watched it. And it's also been cool having a lot of my friends watch it as well, because then I end up talking with them about it. And it just helps me understand the movie so much more and gives me so many other ideas. So it's really cool to see how many layers every other person picks up as well.
I totally agree. Yeah, I know you were really excited to show me this film, so I knew I was in for something, but nothing could have prepared me for what it really was. And I was honestly even more blown away than I expected to be. Like, right after watching it, I was like, damn, that was such a good movie. But similar to a lot of the Yorgos films we've watched today, it just grew on me over time, and I'm just like, this is such a good movie. Like, the storytelling was brilliant. Like, the way they introduced this world and its characters was just perfectly executed. Like, I love how they just threw us right into the deep end of the plot, you know, and like the family dynamic as well. I just thought it flawlessly conveyed just how fucked up this family is, but like simultaneously captured the normalcy of it for them. Like, we see the routines and the calmness and peacefulness around the house while all these horrible things are happening, just especially overall in the way these parents are raising their children. And it just makes this film that much more complex and interesting, I think.
Yeah, it definitely jumps right into it. And
yeah,
for me, it was even from the start, like when that recording starts and they are being given incorrect definitions for words, like literally reshaping the way they perceive language. Like, it's creating a totally different world for them, a whole different reality. I just tie this so closely to like Plato's allegory of the cave, and each
Ooh, I love that.
and each of the siblings having like kind of their journey, you know, with the eldest, the youngest, because it's all differing degrees of them, the way I saw it, like, quote unquote, trying to get out of the cave. And that's another cool thing with the poster of the movie, how the different lines represent different kids. I thought that's because when I saw the poster, I was like, I have no idea what this means. Like, how's this even correlate? Like, what? And then once you think about it a little bit and see what the lines represent, it is pretty cool. And something I did notice just in the last few days, the lines in that poster are blue, red, and yellow, much like all of the color sequences and kinds of kindness. When you see it, it's always blue, red, and yellow writing in the, like, when it says kinds of kindness, it's always in 3, and it's always blue, red, and yellow. And I just found that pretty interesting that the colors are the same. But yeah, no, crazy movie. It was a lot to deal with. Even I'm a guy that likes to rewatch movies, and even after this one, I was like, I'm gonna need to sit with this one at least for a while.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Another aspect of this film I love, I mean, Yorgos' dark humor is just unmatched, honestly. Like, this film is equally terrifying as it is hilarious, in my opinion. There are just so many funny moments, like, but to the point where, like, it's just the perfect dark humor where it's like, I almost feel bad for laughing because these characters seem so real, kind of. And but then also, I don't know, it's like like I was saying, the perfect blend of like very realistic things but also completely unrealistic at the same time. Like, it's everything contradicts itself, basically.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I find myself experiencing in a lot of like the Yorgos movies. It's like, do I laugh or do I like turn away? Is it okay to laugh right now? Like,
that too.
I feel like I shouldn't be laughing, you know? And things like that. And I think a perfect example of that in this movie is when they are done having dinner for the celebration for the birth of their brother and sister and dog that the mom is going to be giving birth to.
Oh, yeah.
And the dad just asks them, should we listen to your grandfather sing? And they're like, yeah. And it's literally Fly Me to the Moon. And the dad is translating the lyrics again incorrectly, kind of playing on the whole language thing and just understanding because it's a different language. And at first it's like kind of funny, but then you listen to what the dad is translating it to, and he's indoctrinating these children to like be their whole lives and only exactly. And it's like very funny but very unsettling at the same time. And that whole aspect throughout all Yorgos films is something that I really like, because I just like movies that make me feel something, you know, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's happiness and make me laugh, you know, or whether
Yeah.
it's like, oh man, I don't want to see that again. You know, it's
Right.
like
Yeah.
if a movie's able to get that reaction out of me, it's a good one in my book, you know. And
I totally
yeah,
agree.
this one's crazy. Yeah, and funny enough, I saw a lot of people just like looking at Letterboxd reviews, a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
being like, you cannot convince me otherwise that this movie is about homeschooling your children. And I was like, oh man. I was like, oh
Oh
no.
my God, that's hilarious.
But yeah, I just found that pretty funny. And I mean, I guess to an extent, but I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
Yorgos was homeschooled. Who knows? And he's trying to
Yeah.
deal with that.
I almost feel bad laughing, but this scene is genuinely hilarious, even though it is
Yeah.
like mentally, even though it is abusive technically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and the fact that it's like, this is your grandfather, still keeping them in like that illusion that there's nowhere else outside this property. You know, like
yeah,
no one else can be making this because it's just my granddad, and of course he's going to be singing about the family relationships we have in this, like because there's literally nothing else for them, so it makes
yeah,
sense to them. And yeah, something pretty interesting that just talking with shout out Jonathan and
mm-hmm,
Cochran, my
mm-hmm,
boys, we were just talking about the movie a lot, and I find it pretty interesting because at first I was like, yes, the movie is definitely about a like control and seeking to like oppress and things like that, and
yeah,
like someone's liberation out of that. And I
yeah,
also remember while we were watching it and we took a brief pause during it, and you said, you were like, the mom is scary, right?
right,
And I agree, and the mom's role in the movie was really really interesting, you know, because it's
yes,
like someone that is very clearly complicit
mm-hmm,
about everything that's going on, but when at the end when everything goes wrong,
yeah,
she's on her hands and knees barking like a dog just like the rest of the kids.
right,
And it's like, okay, how much agency does she have in this whole thing now? And then just thinking about it, it's like she's stuck in that place just as much as the kids are, you
yeah,
know. And he's telling his coworker like, oh, she's been sick, she's been in an accident, doesn't want to leave the house. And then it's like definitely much more of this guy like trying to take control of this very little, like not little because it's his family, but like
mm-hmm,
this one aspect of his life that he knew he could control. Like he did
yeah,
everything to make sure he had control over that. And that was another really interesting aspect of the movie, of just like the dad's role, because you don't see him much, but
no, yeah.
he has an influence in everything that's going on.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and like the development over time like you were talking about, cuz yeah, at first I was like, "Oh my god, this mom is equally horrible." And then you do realize that she is a victim herself. And yeah, like you were saying, to add to when he's like, "Yeah, she's sick, she doesn't want to leave the home." There's so many moments of her on the phone, which she hides from the kids. They don't even know that a phone exists. They
It's
use the
salt.
word phone for salt at the dinner
Yeah.
table, so they have no concept of that. And when she's on the phone in her room, the two daughters think that she's just talking to herself, and that gives them anxiety. They're like, "Uh-oh, mom's talking to herself again." Um, and I was just always curious, like, because we've seen scenes in there where she's like, "We need more chocolate," and like it's obvious that she's speaking to her husband.
Mhm.
But she's on the phone so much that a part of me wonders if like she's talking to other people, and that's like her only source of freedom, basically.
Mhm.
I like to imagine that she would literally just be calling like random stores and stuff just to
Mhm.
like have some form of other human interaction. But
Yeah.
who knows, you know? That's the thing, is like there's I'm this movie, I think, did explain so much about like their world and like how structured it is, but there's still so much ambiguity in it, like that kind of stuff where you're like, you see so many details, but there's just enough to like still have you have questions, which is something that I loved about this movie.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really good point that you brought up. I hadn't thought about that before, that like the mom could be calling anyone in the outside world to try to like just feel like at least a part of her is still out there, or like she can have that kind of contact. Yeah, no, that's
because we even do like get a scene where she kind of breaks down and she's like having doubts about everything they're doing, and she seems to feel very claustrophobic, and the like father is just like, nope, doesn't matter, sorry, this is how we do things here.
And it's kind of interesting because that scene where he is in his office and he's talking to like his boss or his coworker or client or something like that, and the other guy's like, I like these tiles, like, and he's like, no, but I like these ones, I think we should do these. And the guy's like, yeah, but we're gonna do these, showing that like even in his job this guy doesn't even have a say in what tiles to put in, so it's like he's really trying to control all of this. And another scene where that just becomes so much clearer is when he confronts the prostitute, which also, side note about that, very interesting that her profession was a security guard, like a barrier.
At his factory, right?
Yeah, but just the fact that she's like a security guard, and that's like entry and exit out of the cave, like a guard. Like the fact that she was the one that basically was the guard leading the eldest out of the cave, quote unquote, if you're looking at it as Plato's allegory. But when he hits her with the VCR box and like smashes her in the head, he says like, I hope your children grow up to have terrible influences, which first, again, is kind of funny because that's not like the first thing you'd expect someone that's really angry. Like, that's a thought out plan for the future. He's like, I hope your kids.
His genuine concern.
He's like, I hope true. He's like, I hope your kids grow up to have very negative influences for the evil that you brought upon my family, which was giving the daughter movies. So it's just
for our
like,
listeners, she, in exchange for getting her own pleasure because she was not being satisfied by the eldest son, she then like had this power dynamic with the eldest daughter. She would basically exchange pleasure for pop culture pleasure with the eldest, if that makes sense. Like, she'd be giving her Rocky. She had a few VHSs. I think it was Rocky, it was Jaws. And Flashdance were at least like the three films that I recognized, because we don't actually ever see the films, but the eldest starts to repeat like lines from the movie, which I think is really significant given that they already have like such a different vocabulary from the outside world. So it's interesting to me that she even she's like a child, she can just watch that stuff and understand their like tone and everything. And, they're American films, like, and this is a Greek movie, and we can assume it's set in Greece, I would imagine, because they're speaking Greek. But again, I guess we don't really know when it comes to Yorgos. It could be anywhere in the world. It may not even be this world for all we know.
Yeah, with the pop culture references, they come up a lot in his previous films. Also in Alps, like, they always ask the patients who their favorite actor is to try to get, like, it really seems like that's the one thing they need to get, like, before they die. Is like, I need to find out who their favorite actor is to know, like that gives them some sort of crazy insight as to how to portray this person. So cool to see Yorgos giving those American pop culture references, kind of just like a little tip of his hat to him and stuff like that. So yeah, that was cool. And even just while you were saying that, it made me realize that like the older was literally acting, like she was just memorizing the lines. And I just think that's cool. Also, another thing that happens in Alps, that you're watching actors act as these dead people. So just like that,
connection
whole thing
there,
exactly. And another thing that you were saying with the fact that she was watching these movies is that before all their movies were just home videos, and you notice how like when they would be like, let's watch a movie, it'd just be like a home video of them of like what I imagine was like a few years ago, and you end up seeing like the youngest knows every single word to these home videos that they're watching. And yeah, it's a lot. Like there's so
That scene
many.
was so trippy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would never that was honestly like one of my favorite short moments of the film, because it's just like, how do you think of that? And it's such a weird little blip of a scene, but I feel like it, like you were saying, it just speaks volumes about like this world that the fathers created for them, and like who they are as characters and their identities and their personalities as well. Because yeah, like we were talking about earlier, I think it's so interesting that like they all are under the same set of rules, but they're very different. Like all three of the kids are very different from each other. And I think I was talking about how like I thought Alps was pretty emotional, but this one I thought was even more so, because the kids are like kind of children, and I think that makes them sympathetic. So it's like another level where you're just like, oh my God, I feel so bad for these people.
Yeah, and I think that's something that for the listeners we need to clear up, because they don't give them any names. So literally the only way for you to refer to them are as the kids, because that's their role. But these characters are 20s or mid-20s probably. Like these are adults. Like these are adults, but in the whole like scheme and family unit that they're placed in, they are just the children. And the movie literally refers to them as just like the eldest, the middle one, and the youngest. Like that's all you get from them. And that I think also speaks volumes to the amount of identity they were given. And with the eldest adopting the name Bruce, and that scene was also really funny, but like you're like, oh, look at her just like acting like she's turning to her name Bruce. But then if you think about it, you're like, this is her first time having a name and like having an identity for herself.
It's such a special moment. And she's named herself after the shark in Jaws.
Exactly.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, all the movies she watched, she's like, yeah, that name's awesome.
Yeah. And again, like, do I laugh, or is this the most like psychologically important moment in this woman's life? And I'm laughing.
And the irony of it. Yeah. It's so interesting.
That's also, like you said, like how different all the kids are. It's like the eldest is kind of just like really questioning everything and kind of just like acting on impulses, kind of, like her brother takes the plane, so she slices his arm open, and she's just like kind of letting herself go where her kind of impulses take her and stuff like that. And it ends up leading to her questioning everything, which ultimately gives her freedom, or maybe not. But
that ending.
But and what I find interesting is that she was just kind of doing all this. The youngest one was kind of like, I'm going to learn about science and the human body and try to be like useful in this way, and like expanding her mind that way. And like even I just find that really interesting. And then the kid, the guy, I hate him.
The oldest brother.
Yeah.
I feel like he is like the one who is, unfortunately, it seems there's no hope left for him. Like he's been the most brainwashed, and even just like maybe personality wise, he just doesn't have that like flare of curiosity, like in the same extent as his sisters. Like obviously we see that moment where the security guard prostitute tells him she had a dream where he was a zombie, and he asks his mom what's a zombie, and she tells him a little yellow flower, like a dandelion, and he's like, oh, there's zombies in the garden. So he definitely has some like childish level to it, but he doesn't have the like bandwidth to think past all that stuff. And granted, like the eldest daughter had a leg up in this situation by getting her hands on those like little details, the VHSs, which are like little details or like windows into the outside world. But
yeah, and it was really interesting because like a lot of her kind of realization that things are different than they have been told to her entire life was when the security guard prostitute was kind of like, you can have this headband if you go ahead and do this for me, you know?
Right.
And in that sense, it was like very sexual in that moment.
Yeah.
But then the oldest one goes to the sister and is like, if you lick my shoulder, you know, like, I'll give it to you, you know?
Yeah.
And then it was like that, as much as it's like, it just wasn't sexual for them, you know? Like, it was literally purely transactional.
Yes.
And she was just like, whoa, so I can do this? And then she was just like, with the younger daughter, it never really was that sexual of her being like, I'll lick your hand if you give me this. Like, there was never another intent after that. And I think you see that when she like wakes her dad up by like licking him while he's asleep. And nowhere near, like, it's weird because you're thinking like something weird's happening here, you know? But then he wakes up and she's like, can I please have the harpoon gun? And like, that's it. That's where it stops for her. So, and I feel like the fact that they were hiring a prostitute for the son was like numbed him from that, or like experiencing something close to what his sister's experienced, because it literally was just a transaction. It was like, son, she's here for you today. And he was like, okay. He was even like, I don't want to do this. Like, there were days that he was, and it was,
he was like, Dad will be mad if I don't. So
exactly.
He had no
agency.
Yes, he had no agency whatsoever.
Exactly.
Whereas I feel like the other two kind of did show that, or at least like you were saying, the youngest learned from her older sister.
And and I don't know, I feel like I was thinking about that because he really doesn't have any agency at all, and the parents have done everything they can to, like, even though he's like traditionally, like, quote unquote, like the guy, and it's two girls, like, he's very much the bottom on the totem pole, even though he's like, you know,
the
like,
boy.
He might
I'm the eldest boy.
Succession. No, but
he's so Kendall Roy.
But like, you know, he has the most stickers, right? And it's like, that's good, but when
those are bonus points.
But when when the youngest breaks into his room and hits him with a pole and is like, I didn't do that. It was a cat that jumped through the window. You know, it's like they take the daughter's side, showing like, we don't care if this is the most ridiculous thing we've ever heard. Like, we're not believing you.
You know, obviously they know that a cat did not come through the window and attack the son, but that's what they've told them cats are capable of. So they're like, call
that
her
too.
A liar.
Exactly. Yeah, they got to keep that illusion of what the cat is. But even when she cuts him in the arm, she doesn't really face much retribution for that, does she?
I don't think so. I don't think she does. I think you're spot on that, like, every interaction with the oldest son is much colder, with the parents is much colder than with the daughters. Like, they don't seem to like him at all.
And I wonder because this is kind of what we were talking about with some of the guys, that the dad has created like a very patriarchal system in the household, you know, like, and I don't know if maybe they did that because it's like, that the son would be like, in his eyes, his competition, you know? So it was like, we have to numb this guy down to keep like this system that he's created to control his entire family intact. And,
I think you're absolutely right too, because that makes me think of, they kind of briefly mentioned that they have another brother, and we can assume that he was actually the oldest if he does exist. And we see that oldest brother interacting with the missing brother through the fence of like their property. And obviously he's not there, but like, he's not on the other side of the fence. I don't think so. But my theory is like, you know, maybe there was an oldest and he did escape. and they're trying to like erase that. And maybe that's also why the dad is so hard on the son, because he's like, oh, I kind of screwed up with that one. I did let him get to be too much of the man of the house, and so he left the house.
Yeah,
and like
exactly.
we can't have this happen again. So
the way I read the whole like fake brother situation on the other side of the wall was that it was because for the sisters, they were always like throwing them food, you know?
Yeah. They're like, I was thinking about how much shit is on the other side of that wall.
But they were like throwing him food and stuff. The brother was throwing rocks at him.
Yeah.
And that scene where he's just like at the fence, and they do it so early on in the movie to the point where you literally have no idea what's going on. And the brother's just staring into the bushes, and he's like, I clean the car so much better than you. I wish you were still here to see how much better I clean the car than you. And I think the way I took that was like, it was a way to keep them even more subordinate. Like, like if you don't clean the car, you're ending up out there again. And also in the whole like kind of the theme of curbing the son's like impulses and stuff like that, like that probably could have fed like the traditional male's need for competition. So he's like, you want to compete with someone, like go yell at your brother out there and be like, I clean the car better than you. And like that's who he's competing against the entire time, because he doesn't not want to end up out there, you know, just like they did to him. So
interesting.
That's how I read it, that it was like, you better not do it. Like, have you seen those videos where they show the like babies or the dogs that's like with the stuffed animal, and they like make it like it doesn't want to eat, and then they punch it, and then the dog eats the food. Yeah, something like that.
It is
like look
that,
what I did to him. Yeah,
like conditioning.
That's how I kind of read that. But the fact that they're like, you're saying that maybe there was an older brother who like got out, and maybe that's why it's like so dangerous out there, apart from the whole thing that they're just trying to keep them in there, you know? But yeah, that's interesting. I think that's another layer. There you go.
I mean, yeah, like I never thought about it the way you just explained it. And now I'm like fascinated thinking about that, because I think that makes so much sense psychologically for everyone involved. It's just like I love just like how ambiguous it is. I've used that word so much in this episode, but it's just such a core
for
feature.
a reason. A reason. Yeah, and another whole thing that I found pretty interesting is that when the cat got into the property, and the mom was like, "There's a cat in here," and he was like, "What did you tell them?" And then the dad says. And that's another thing, just a complete side note about this movie. I highly recommend this movie. I recommend you watch it if you're listening to this. Some uncomfortable moments, but hey, you'll live, okay?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
There's a lot to it, but I will say you got to be locked in to every line of dialogue, to everything you see, because it's being translated. So I blinked, and the first time I watched this movie, I was literally posting questions in forums because I thought there was a huge plot hole. And then I just rewatched the scene and was like, dude, I literally blinked and missed a word, and it almost threw me off. So if you're going to watch it, make sure you're ready for it. That's all I'll say. But in that scene, the dad, when she's talking about the cat, the dad asks her, what did you say? And then when she tells him what she said to the kids, which you don't hear at that moment because they're on the phone, he says, okay, good, it's about time. And I was always like, it's about time for what? And I think after watching it twice, because at first I thought it was like, it's about time to teach them about like what it takes to get out of the house, which is losing your second dog tooth, your canine tooth.
Yeah.
But they knew all that. They would ask them, and they were answering the questions, so they already knew that. And I was just always really confused about what, like, it's about time. And the first thing the dad does before he gets home is stage the outside kid's murder by a cat.
Yes.
And I think that was just like them getting overwhelmed and being like, damn, this fake brother that we made up, this was a crazy lie. And now we're having to keep up with it like every few days.
Too much. Yeah.
Because they're over there feeding him, throwing rocks at him. Like they actually think there's someone out there. Like it was just getting too out of hand for them. And they're like, okay, finally we can kill him off, quote unquote. by
Oh my
by
God.
staging it as a cat. You know, it's like, we'll get rid of this line. They won't be
The
asking about
deadliest
this
creature
anymore.
on earth.
Yeah.
So good.
That's another example of a really traumatizing scene when he kills the cat with the hedge clippers. I
Yes,
knew
so
I knew that
disturbing.
I knew that was going to get some reactions out of the group of friends that we watched it with. But then it
Yeah.
cuts to the cat's body, and they might have
Mhm.
well put X's on its eyes, and
Yeah.
you know, it looked so goofy. It had its like tongue sticking out. It was like kind of
Yeah.
funny. It was kind of funny.
It was. It was. I can't lie. Like, it's, as an animal lover, you hate to see it, but also as an animal lover, I've definitely seen much worse
Yeah.
like death scenes in films than that one. That one had like that one was hilarious. I can't lie. No disrespect to the cat or whatever happened, but it was really
No
funny.
cats were harmed. There were definitely no cats harmed.
No real animal abuse in this. Just to clarify for our listeners.
But yeah, no, that's the whole cat thing and everything. It was all just a ploy to keep them in there, really.
Yeah, no, totally. I also just like stylistically, I loved the way this film was shot. I thought this is where I really noticed all those like medium shots and really strict framing where they're like cutting off the heads of people in the frame. And I think you spoke about this earlier and you said it perfectly. Like, it's similar to like we were talking about in Killing of a Sacred Deer, where you said Yorgos wanted the viewer to feel like a little bug going around, like watching them, crawling around watching them. This one is also similar. Like you feel like a literal fly on the wall within the space, which gives a very creepy feel to it. Like we're spying on these people. And then also like I loved the natural lighting and very naturalistic cinematography. Like you would get like sunspots or like sun flares reflecting off the frame. And I thought that was just a genius contrast, that like a genius way to directly contrast all of the completely unnatural stuff that is happening within the family and like within the walls of their private hidden property, or like honestly, for a better word, prison, if we're being real.
Yeah.
So I really liked that aspect, just like stylistically. I thought it was so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, another motif I noticed, we were talking about earlier, different, Mike was listing different things like head trauma, waking up to something horrible, the cut off cinematography or like framing. And one thing I noticed in this one and a couple others was sometimes Yorgos will just have these like moments of silence, but with action happening. Like, I think in this one, it was when the kids are all swimming in the pool. It's like they're splashing around, they're jumping, they're diving, but it's like dead silent. Like you could hear a pin
Literally
drop.
deafening. Like when you
Deafening
start
silence,
to hear
yeah.
that ringing in your ears because it's so
Yes.
quiet. Yeah.
Mhm.
I noticed that as
Yeah.
well when we were doing these rewatches. I
Yeah,
noticed that as
I
well.
thought that was so cool. I can't say that I know what it means or what it's all about. I don't know if it is supposed to mean anything, but I think it's almost like gives you a visceral reaction to what you're watching. Like you're so locked in, and then all of a sudden it kind of like pulls you out for a second, and it's almost like you're just like hanging in midair, like you're just suspended in this moment, and then they're like, all right back to it, let's go. Like it's like he's giving you a breath of like fresh air, and then he's like, psych, here we go. There's some more really disturbing crazy shit.
Literally, yeah, no, I did notice that as well, and now that I think about it, I'm trying to think if I've noticed that in any of the other ones.
Yeah, I think there was a scene in like Killing of the Sacred Deer where I think it was right after Martin tells Steven about the curse and he's driving home and he's like flying down the highway, and it's that deafening silence where you're just like, this dude's world is crashing down around him.
Yeah. No, it's a lot of really crazy stuff. Yeah, and another thing that I do just want to mention is the scene where she decides it's time for her Dogtooth to come out.
Yes.
And she's in the bathroom. That was a crazy scene, and it was so crazy to me because what she did is so incredibly painful, yet she didn't wince once. She was so happy to do this. It was
Yeah.
her time. She was growing up. It was finally, she was losing her dog tooth. And she even looked in the mirror and smiled with more than her dog tooth missing and blood streaming down her face. To me, it felt very like Joker-ish.
Yes, totally.
When she was looking in the mirror there. But she even like brushes her hair behind her ear and like gives a little smile, like I did
I'm
it.
all grown up.
Exactly. And another interesting part of the ending that I think just shows how much of a hold this whole farce had on her was that as much as she knocked her dog tooth out and was ready to get the hell out of there, the whole rule was that you could not leave the house in the car without being in the car because it would be dangerous. You could only go to the outside world inside the car. That's why she didn't just run out and be like, I'm free.
Yeah.
She was still held back by that belief and that false sense of reality that the parents gave her that was like, it's toxic out there. That's kind of how I took it, was like, it's toxic air out there unless you're in the car. So she was like, I'm free, but I guess I gotta hide in the trunk so I can make it out and see the outside world. She still didn't think she could do that. And yeah, that was just very powerful because you're literally like, this is so heinous, but like now she's mentally free. And then you're like, oh, wait, she got in the car. She didn't just leave. And it's kind of like another whole punch in the gut, which doesn't even prepare you for the biggest punch in the gut, which is the entire ending of the movie.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Like, honestly, perfectly said. I think that sums up so much of like just exactly where Yorgos was going with the film. You know, like I think you're spot on with it, and it's such a great climax and ending, and yeah, I just fell in love with it. I really did.
So you liked this ending, right?
Yes, I loved this ending.
But I don't remember you liking very much the lobster's ending.
I did not like the lobster's ending. Only
I don't
because...
understand. Then I don't understand.
I don't know why. I just feel like this one is... It's so open that it's more hopeful. To me. Maybe not, though. Maybe it's not. Okay, honestly, though, I guess my thing... Okay. This is dark. In a way, it's more hopeful because I almost feel better that she just no longer has to live that way. Even if she doesn't survive it, I love to see that she tried to get out. And like, to me, that's a success. The fact that she was able to leave the property inside, even though she's in the trunk of the car, like, that's a win for me. And like, I don't know. That's why I liked it. I guess, okay, and again, like I do need to revisit The Lobster at some point. I really liked that movie as well, but that one I feel like I was like, oh, I just wanted to see more, to be honest. Whereas this, I was like, I don't really need to see more. Like that was the perfect open ending where it's like, okay, it's up to you now. But I don't know. That's just my I guess they're very similar the more I think about it.
Yeah, those endings I think are pretty similar, and yeah, it sucks because you got to make the decision, like Yorgos likes making you do. You gotta make the choice, and it's really funny because when I talk to someone about, okay, we'll stop mentioning the lobster. We're not talking about the lobster.
We're not talking about the lobster.
But in Dogtooth, like if I talk with people, like some people would be like, oh yeah, she made it out 100%. And then someone else will be like, dude, are you kidding me? She died.
Yeah.
And then it's
like
literally
people are
like
so dead, like headstrong about it.
So headstrong about it. And I love it when a movie does that. Shout out another movie that does that. Anatomy of a Fall. Goated movie.
Oh.
Highly recommend as well.
So true. Yeah. Dogtooth, guys. It is quite the ride. Mike, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Not really. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, one of my favorite movies. Highly recommend this one. You'll make it
Yes.
through. I promise. Don't worry. And second of all, go watch Kinds of Kindness.
Yes, go watch Kinds of Kindness, and please let us know what you guys think. We're excited to hear what everyone's thoughts are on this new addition to the Yorgos filmography. If you guys want to check out Dogtooth, you can rent it on Amazon Prime or wherever you rent your movies, and check your local video stores. This is guaranteed going to be there. I feel like it's such an
2009. It's got to be in there.
acclaimed film, and yeah, it's going to be there. And that's a wrap on our Yorgos Lanthimos Director's Spotlight. 3 absolute bangers. God, this was so much fun, and thank you so much for putting me on the Yorgos train, Mike. I still have some more films to watch, like The Favorite and obviously Kinds of Kindness. Very excited to see that this week. So yeah, I'm very excited to continue my journey through Yorgos filmography. And of course, thank you so much for joining me today on the Gimme Three podcast. It was genuinely an honor to have you here.
Honor's all mine.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we're excited to hear your thoughts on these 3 films. If you'd like to support us, here are 2 simple ways. 1, automatic downloads on Spotify. Subscribe to our show, click the settings wheel, and toggle on that auto download episodes. This helps you listen to us anytime, anywhere, and it boosts our reach. We also have a Patreon you can subscribe to for just $5 a month. You can access bonus episodes, spoiler-free recommendations, and so much more. Click the support the show or Patreon links in the episode description below to access that. Shout out to all of our listeners, all of our subscribers. Your support means the world to us. And you guys can also follow us on Instagram at Gimme Three Podcast. That's GIMME spell out 3 podcast. Share your thoughts on today's films and give us a follow while you're there. We'd love to hear from you guys. So if that doesn't work for you, you can also send us a text through the link in the episode description with your thoughts or film recommendations. Whatever you guys send to us, we'll share on the show. So let's expand our watch lists together. Alrighty, Mike, if you want, you can tell our listeners where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, definitely. You can find me on Letterboxd at Eljaiek. That's Meljaiek.
Yep. And you guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile or on Letterboxd at Bella Efstratis. Anyways, thanks again, Mike. Thank you, listeners, for joining us on the Gimme Three podcast, and we'll see you at the movies.